What happens when a pop icon's past collides with present-day scrutiny on live television? You're about to find out, because what unfolded between Gwen Stefani and George Stephanopoulos on Good Morning America was nothing short of explosive. This wasn't the usual fluffy celebrity sit-down about a new album or tour. This was a confrontation, raw, tense, and unforgettable. By the end, Gwen was storming off set, leaving Stephanopoulos and the entire studio frozen in silence. And within minutes, social media was on fire. But before we dive into the meltdown that everyone's talking about, make sure you hit subscribe and drop a comment below. You'll want to weigh in on this one. The morning began innocently enough. Gwen Stefani arrived for what should have been a straightforward interview about her latest projects. She looked every bit the superstar. Confident, polished, dressed in a striking black and white ensemble that screamed her signature style. The audience was buzzing, the cameras rolling, and Stephanopoulos greeted her with his trademark professional smile. "Gwen, it's wonderful to have you here on Good Morning America. You look fantastic, as always." "Thank you, George," Gwen replied, settling into her chair with that trademark California cool. At first, everything flowed smoothly. They chatted about her new single climbing the charts, her fashion line, her family, even her time on singing competition shows. Gwen was animated, relaxed, and charismatic, the perfect guest. But then, the energy shifted. Stephanopoulos shuffled, his notes, his tone turning serious. "Gwen, I have to ask you about something that's been making headlines recently." The room chilled. Gwen's smile stayed fixed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of tension. "Of course, George. What would you like to know?" "There have been resurfaced interviews and comments from your past," Stephanopoulos said carefully, "specifically about your use of cultural imagery in your music and fashion during the early 2000s. For the first time, Gwen's composure faltered. "Well, I'm not sure what you're getting at," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Stephanopoulos pressed on. "I'm talking about your Harajuku era. Some critics say you profited off stereotypical representations of Japanese culture. Without giving proper credit or respect, they call it cultural appropriation." The audience held its breath. This was no longer light entertainment. It was interrogation. Gwen leaned back, her jaw tightening. "George, I've addressed this before. My love for Japanese culture has always been genuine. I spent time there. I learned. I admired. Everything I did came from a place of respect." But Stephanopoulos didn't let up. "Critics argue appreciation and appropriation aren't the same thing. They point to your dancers, the so-called Harajuku girls, saying they were reduced to accessories while you built an empire off the image." Now Gwen's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her voice sharper. "That's a complete misrepresentation of what I did." "A white artist?" Gwen's voice caught, rising with a mix of indignation and disbelief. "George, that's exactly the kind of thinking that divides us. I'm not just a white artist. I'm a woman, a mother, someone who has spent her life breaking barriers and bringing people together through music." Her words came fast now, spilling over with frustration. The practiced calm of her earlier answers had given way to raw emotion. Stephanopoulos, steady as ever, leaned in slightly. "And yet, Gwen, critics argue that in bringing people together, you may have also reinforced stereotypes. They aren't questioning your identity as a woman or a mother or an artist. They're questioning power dynamics. Who gets to borrow? From whose culture? And who profits from it?" The silence in the studio was suffocating. Even the air felt heavier. "That's unfair," Gwen shot back, her voice trembling now with both anger and wounded pride. I didn't take anything. I created art. I gave opportunities. I built bridges. And the idea that I have to sit here and defend every decision I made 2 decades ago, on live television, feels like an attack, not a conversation. There it was. The line between calm professionalism and confrontation had been crossed. Gwen, Stephanopoulos said carefully, his tone still even. The decisions of public figures don't disappear with time. They remain part of the cultural record. And when those decisions resurface, it's not an ambush. It's accountability. Gwen exhaled sharply, pushing back her chair just slightly. Accountability or humiliation? Because right now, George, it feels like the latter, a murmur rippled through the audience. The tension was unbearable. Viewers will make their own judgment, Stephanopoulos replied. That was the breaking point. Gwen's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing as she stood abruptly. The scrape of her chair against the studio floor rang louder than any applause. You know what? She said, her voice now icy and deliberate. I don't have to sit here and be disrespected on national television. I came to share my music, my art, not to be torn apart. And with that, Gwen turned, gathered herself, and strode off the set. The cameras kept rolling. Stephanopoulos sat frozen, his professional mask intact, but his eyes betraying the weight of what had just unfolded. The audience was stunned into silence, and the control room, if anyone had been watching, was chaos. Millions of viewers had just witnessed a pop icon's composure shatter on live television. And within moments, the internet would do the rest. There's that word again, Gwen shouted, whirling on him, her face flushed with fury. Privilege. You throw it at me like it cancels out decades of work, sweat, and sacrifice. You think you can reduce my entire career to one word? The audience sat frozen, the tension so heavy, it was suffocating. Cameras zoomed in tight, capturing every tremor in her voice, every furious gesture. Gwen, Stephanopoulos said evenly, it's not about erasing your work. It's about recognizing that your success exists alongside systems that give you opportunities others might never get. That's what privilege means. And acknowledging it doesn't erase your talent. It makes you accountable. Gwen let out a sharp, incredulous laugh, pacing behind her chair like a caged animal. Accountable? Accountable to who, George? To critics who twist my words? To strangers online who've never walked a day in my shoes? I've built my career on love and creativity, not exploitation. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who has the problem. Gasps rippled through the audience. Stephanopoulos' eyes narrowed ever so slightly, sensing the moment spiraling past the point of no return. Or maybe, he said quietly, this is the moment where the world finally sees that love and creativity aren't excuses for ignoring impact. That landed like a blow. Gwen stopped pacing, her eyes blazing as she leaned forward over the desk. Impact? My impact has been inspiring millions of people, giving hope, giving joy. And you... She jabbed a finger at him, voice trembling with rage. You want to sit here and tear it all down for ratings. Gwen, I'm doing my job, Stephanopoulos replied, calm but unflinching. Asking questions, holding people accountable. That's what journalism is. Her composure was gone, replaced by raw anger. No, what this is a setup. You didn't want an interview. You wanted a spectacle. Well, congratulations, George. You got it. With that, Gwen shoved her chair back so hard it nearly toppled. The scrape echoed through the studio. She grabbed her mic pack, yanked it free, and tossed it onto the desk in front of him. "I don't have to sit here and be humiliated," she spat, turning sharply toward the exit. The audience was dead silent. Even the crew stood frozen. Stephanopoulos, still seated, kept his gaze steady on her retreating figure. "Gwen," he called after her, his tone calm but carrying across the stunned studio. Walking away doesn't end the conversation. But she didn't turn back. Gwen Stefani, global pop icon, stormed off Good Morning America live on air, leaving behind a journalist at his desk, an audience in shock, and millions of viewers watching history in the making. "You keep throwing that word at me like it negates everything I've worked for, everything I've achieved through talent and dedication." The studio was silent now, dead silent, except for Stephanie's raised voice and the low hum of television equipment. Even the production crew had frozen in place, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before them. Stephanopoulos leaned forward slightly in his chair. "Gwen, acknowledging privilege doesn't negate hard work or talent. It just means recognizing that some people face obstacles. Others don't." "Don't lecture me about obstacles," Stephanie shot back, her voice hoarse from shouting. "I grew up poor, George. I worked multiple jobs to buy band equipment. I was rejected by record labels for years before anyone gave me a chance. Don't you dare tell me I had it easy." "Personal struggles don't cancel out systemic advantages," Stephanopoulos replied evenly. His calm tone only seemed to enrage her more. "You can have worked incredibly hard and still benefited from privilege. Those two truths aren't mutually exclusive." Stephanie stopped pacing and glared at him with fury in her eyes. "You know what this really is? Jealousy. Resentment from people who want to tear down anyone successful. You can't stand that someone like me found inspiration everywhere and turned it into art people loved." "That's not what this is about," Stephanopoulos said firmly. "This is about accountability, about using your platform responsibly, about listening when communities say they've been hurt." "Hurt?" Stephanie's voice cracked. "Hurt?" "By me loving their culture. Hurt by me sharing it with my fans. Hurt by me making beautiful music and fashion. That's not hurt, George. That's manufactured outrage." The veteran journalist shook his head. "When Japanese-American voices, Asian-American activists, cultural scholars all raise the same concerns, that's not manufactured outrage. That's a pattern that deserves to be taken seriously." Her face flushed red, tears of frustration threatening. "I am so sick of being told what I should and shouldn't do by people who don't know me, who don't understand my intentions, who want to police every creative choice I make. Nobody's policing your creativity," Stephanopoulos countered. "They're asking you to consider the impact of your choices." "The impact?" Stephanie laughed bitterly. "The impact of my music has been bringing joy to millions, celebrating diversity, bringing cultures together. But apparently that's not good enough for you." She snatched her purse, slinging it over her shoulder with a violent motion. "You know what, George? I'm done. I came here in good faith to talk about music, and you ambushed me with this politically correct nonsense." "Gwen, please," Stephanopoulos said, standing now. "These are important conversations we need to have." "Important conversations?" She spat, already striding toward the edge of the set. "This isn't a conversation. This is a public execution. You brought me here to humiliate me on national television." Her heels clacked angrily against the polished floor as the cameras followed her exit. She spun once at the studio doors for a final shot. "You want a story, George? Here's your story." "I refuse to apologize for being an artist. I refuse to apologize for finding inspiration in beauty. and I refuse to sit here while you try to destroy my reputation for ratings. Gwen, nobody's trying to destroy anything, Stephanopoulos called after her, his composure cracking for the first time. We're just asking for accountability, but she was already gone, shoving through the double doors without a backward glance. The studio sat stunned. Stephanopoulos stood at his desk, visibly shaken, before finally lowering himself back into his chair. He cleared his throat, looked directly into the camera, and said quietly, "We'll be right back after this commercial break." The screen faded out, but the damage and the spectacle was already etched into daytime TV history. What began as a routine celebrity interview had turned into one of the most explosive confrontations ever aired, a battle over culture, privilege, and accountability that ended with Gwen Stefani storming off live television. The question lingered. Was Stephanopoulos delivering tough journalism or orchestrating a public ambush? That, as always, was left for viewers to decide.